Welcome to this WiseOwl Excel VBA tutorial. In this video we'll explain how to log into a website which uses Windows security. We'll explain what happens first of all if you attempt to use Internet Explorer to navigate to a website which uses Windows security. We'll then show you the quickest way to solve that problem by avoiding Internet Explorer altogether and sending your credentials in an XML HTTP request. If that's not an option and you do need to use Internet Explorer, we'll then show you how you can use the Windows shell object to capture a reference to the security window, then how you can send keystrokes to a window to simulate entering your username and password, and then simulate pressing the Enter key to actually finally log into the website. So let's get started. To get started in this example, I've created a brand new blank Excel workbook. Then I've written a few simple values in column A and column B. The values in column B, I've changed the font colour to white so that you can't actually see what they are. The main reason is that the values I've entered in here are values relating to some of our internal systems at WiseOwl, and if I gave those away to you, I would be shot and then I wouldn't be able to make any more videos. So nobody wants that to happen. So we're going to reference the values in cells B1 for the URL of the site I'm going to connect to, and then the username and password in cells B2 and B3, and then cell B4 contains the name of a specific HTML element that I'm going to get a reference to from the page that will eventually be loaded. Obviously this makes it quite difficult for you to test the exact same code that I'm writing here, but if you can find a website that behaves in the same way as the one I'm about to show you behaves, then you'll be able to fill in your own credentials for that. So sorry I can't make this more clear or less ambiguous, but this is the issue with giving away security details. So having put these values in, I'm going to head straight to the Visual Basic Editor, and then I'm going to insert a new module, and then I'm going to create a new subroutine called, let's call it Login to Web Page. I'm going to show you two main techniques to solve this problem. One uses Internet Explorer and the other uses XML HTTP requests. Both techniques will need to be able to capture a reference to an HTML document. So to help us out with all of that, let's set some references to some object libraries. If we head to the Tools menu and choose References, and then scroll down the list to the section beginning with Microsoft, we can find first of all the Microsoft HTML object library. So let's check a reference to that library. Then we can find the Microsoft Internet Controls library for controlling Internet Explorer. And then a little further down we can find Microsoft XML. So a little further down for this one, past the V, there we go. So Microsoft XML, and in my case I'm going to use version 6.0. So having referenced those libraries, let's click OK and then start writing the code. First of all, I'll show you how we can or attempt to navigate to the web page we're interested in using Internet Explorer. So let's declare a variable which will hold a reference to a new instance of the Internet Explorer object. So I'm going to say dim IE as new sh.view.Internet Explorer. I'm then simply going to try to navigate to the page whose URL is contained in cell B1 on sheet 1 in this workbook. So I'm going to say ie.navigate, and then I'm going to reference the URL by saying sheet1.range b1. And I'm going to refer to the text property. Text or value will be absolutely fine for this example. Having done that, let's see, first of all, I want to try to print out the location name. So I'm going to assume that we've navigated to a location. Let's say debug.print ie.location name, just so we can see where we've ended up. And then after that's happened, I would like to say ie.quit. Now, of course, I'd want to make sure that I've actually loaded the page. So before I attempt to print out the location name, we should have a little statement that checks whether IE is ready or not. So we can say the standard way we've done this in a few of the previous videos, do while ie.readystate is not equal to readystate complete, or ie.busy. Then we can just continue looping around until we're satisfied that IE is indeed ready for us. I'm deliberately not making Internet Explorer visible so that you can't see where I'm about to end up. But if I just attempt to run this subroutine, we will see one window appear on screen eventually. There we go. So we have a Windows security message. I can't navigate to this page until I've provided some credentials, a username and a password. Okay, so I'm not going to type in my username and password here. All I'm going to do at this point is click cancel. You might notice at this point my code is still running. Internet Explorer will never be ready until this security message has been resolved. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to click cancel, and that will run through the rest of the procedure, i.e. will eventually be ready. I believe if I display the immediate window, I get the location name of 401 unauthorized. Access is denied due to invalid credentials, which is exactly what I would expect to see if I haven't provided any valid credentials. Now, entering those credentials using Internet Explorer is actually pretty tricky. It's far easier if you have the choice to use an XML HTTP request. So in fact, I'm going to show you the basic way, the simplest way to get access to this web page first, using a completely different procedure. Let's create a new subroutine at the top of the module. I'll call this one sub login using XML HTTP. And then inside this subroutine, I'll declare a variable, which I'll call XML request. XML request, I'll spell that with some decent capitalization, as a new ms xml2.xml HTTP 60. The number that appears at the end of the class name there may be different depending on which version of the XML library you referenced. Once I've done that, I can open an XML request by saying XML request.open. And then I need to state first of all which method I'm using. So I'm going to use a get method. I'm trying to retrieve information. Then I can refer to the URL of the page I'm trying to access by using the same technique I used below. So I can say sheet1.range b1.text. I suppose I should have just copied and pasted that. The third parameter, var async, basically determines when the method returns. So by default, the var async parameter is set to true, so it returns immediately. I want to wait until it's finished loading, so I'm going to set that to false to make sure it finishes, it completes the load before I return from it. Then you may be able to make out here in the parameter list, user and password. And yes, this is how simple it is using XML HTTP requests. If I type in a comma, I can refer to the values stored in my other cells. So I put my username in cell B2, so I can just copy and paste that. And I put my password in cell B3. So again, I can paste that again, and there we go. That genuinely is how simple it is to connect to a web page requiring Windows security using an XML HTTP request. Just to prove that this is actually working, what we should do is, first of all, send our request. So let's say XML request.send. And then we should check for the status of the response. So we can say if XML request.status is not equal to 200. So for example, it might be status 401, unauthorized, but hopefully it won't be. It shouldn't be if I pass in the correct credentials. So if the request is not equal to 200, then, so 200 indicates that the status is okay. If it isn't okay, let's provide the user with a simple warning message or a simple message box which says XML request.status, so that they will see the number, and then I'll concatenate that with a hyphen. So essentially I'm trying to construct the same error message that we saw down here with Internet Explorer. And then if I concatenate that with XML request.status text. So if I don't pass in the correct credentials, I'll get the same message appearing here as I saw for the Internet Explorer version. If that's true, then I want to exit the subroutine, and then I can say end if. But assuming that I did indeed connect correctly, what I'd like to do is capture the response text in an HTML document variable. So let's declare a new variable. Let's say dim HTML doc as a new mshtml .html document. Then after my if statement, I can say HTML doc dot body dot inner text, sorry, beg your pardon, inner HTML I should say, equals XML request dot response text. So assuming that I got a valid response, I'll store all that in a new HTML document. What I'd then like to do is just capture a reference to a specific known element on that page whose name I've got stored in cell B4. So let's declare a new variable. I'll call this one HTML message as an MS-HTML dot iHTML element. And I'll try to set a reference to that. I'm going to say set HTML message equals HTML doc dot get element by ID, and the specific ID of that element is held in range B4 dot text. So I'm going to say sheet 1 dot range B4 dot text, and just to save a bit of time I'll copy and paste that, and there we go. So the final part of this is to debug.print my HTML message dot inner text, and that should tell me a little bit of information about what tasks I have to perform. So let's just check that this works by running the subroutine, and hopefully I'll get some information in the immediate window. Looks like I'm a little bit behind on my feedback writing. Oops. So I have a few feedbacks to write for various courses that I've taught recently. So there you go. That really is how simple it is to fill in Windows security credentials to connect to a website using XML HTTP requests. So if you have the choice, definitely do it this way. It's far, far simpler than the technique I'm about to show you using Internet Explorer. To make this work for Internet Explorer, what we're going to attempt to do is capture a reference to the Windows security window that pops up, and then use the send keys method to simulate typing into the two text boxes before submitting it by pressing the enter key. Which isn't a particularly elegant approach, I'll freely admit, but it's one that seems to work, so we'll go with it for now. If you know of a better approach, please do feel free to add some comments below. But for now, this is the technique we're going to use. So I'm going to write a new subroutine to do this. Let's just clear the immediate window for the moment, and then let's head down to the bottom of the module, and then let's add a new subroutine. Let's call this one sub. Let's call it enter credentials. I'll want to pass two values to this procedure so I can call it from my other one. So I'm going to create a parameter called username as string, and then a second parameter called password also as string, two fairly obvious names at least. We'll start in the subroutine by declaring a variable which essentially is going to hold a reference to the little security pop-up or the security window. So I'm going to call it security window, and I'm going to use the generic object type for this. We'll then set the security window variable to be equal to the results of the create object function. So we may have seen the create object function used before when we've used late binding for various techniques, maybe for Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint, or in some of the ActiveX data objects videos. Anyway, in this case, what we're going to do is create an object whose class is wscript.shell. Now, what this does is references the Windows script host library, and if you're not all that familiar with Windows script host, then don't worry, join the club. I'm not that familiar with it either. I know pretty much all I know about the Windows script host I've learned in about the past half an hour. So there's a lot of documentation available about it. You can have a look at this URL if you're interested in reading up on this. There's lots of useful things you can do apparently with Windows script host, one of which is scripting entering credentials for security, which is exactly what we're about to do. Specifically, we're looking at, what are we looking at? This wscript object, which is the name of the library we've just referenced, and then the shell object in there, which is what we've just created our variable to contain, so a shell object. You can have a look at all the methods and properties of that shell object. One of the methods we're going to use here is the AppActivate method, which will activate the little security window so we have access to it. Then we're going to use the send keys method to effectively write information into that little window before we finally hit the enter key to submit it. So, as I say, not the most elegant approach, but it's one that works. So let's go with it. So let's say we've set our security window object and created it. what we need to do next, because the next few lines will all begin with the security window, let's have a with block. Let's say with security window, and then give ourselves a few blank lines and say end with. And then what I'm going to do is say .AppActivate. Now, of course, I don't get any IntelliSense here because I haven't got a reference to this library. It's just a generic object, but I can say .AppActivate, and then I need to reference the name of the window that pops up. Now, hopefully we only have one of these windows appearing when we run this code, and the little title that appeared at the top of that window said Windows Security. So if we enter that, it will get a reference to that specific window. What we can then do is apply the send keys method. So let's say .send keys. And the first thing I want to do, assuming we've just activated that window, we should have the username text box active. So if that's the case, I can send keys using the string passed into the username parameter. Then I can say .send keys again. And what I want to do now is simulate pressing the tab key to tab to the password text box. To use send keys and to pass in a special key rather than a sequence of characters in a literal string, so in a set of double quotes, write a set of braces or curly brackets, and then the name of the key on the keyboard that you want to press effectively. So that's tab in this case. I can then use send keys again, so .send keys, and then I can enter the password using the value that I've passed in via that parameter. And then finally, I want to send keys and press the enter key. So in a similar way to pressing tab, I can open some double quotes and some curly brackets or braces, press the enter key, close the braces and close the double quotes. And that should simulate basically filling in those values in the window and then pressing enter to access the website. Okay, so now I want to call this enter credentials method in the subroutine which logs into the web page using Internet Explorer. I also need to make sure that I've waited until the credentials dialog box has appeared. And as you saw, I can't really use the do while loop to do that. I can't wait until Internet Explorer is ready, because while the security window is displayed, Internet Explorer isn't ready at all. So what I'm going to do is revert to using a very basic technique which just makes Excel wait for a number of seconds before moving on to the next instruction. You may have seen this used in previous videos. I've used the application.wait method. And I want to wait for, if I want to wait for 2 seconds, for example, what I can do is add to the current time using the now method. So I can say now plus a time value, and then in some round brackets and double quotes, the value of time. So 00 for hours, followed by a colon, 00 for minutes, and another colon. And then let's just say 02 for 2 seconds. That should be enough. Feel free to adjust this if your website is running a little slowly. Feel free to up this just to make sure you have waited for long enough. If I bump it up to 3, just in case. Okay, so having done that, I can now call my enter credentials method. So I can say enter credentials. Then I can pass in the values from cell B2 and B3. Let's just copy and paste those from the previous subroutine. Sheet 1 range B2.text and sheet 1.range B3.text. I can copy those and then paste those after the enter credentials method. Again, just to demonstrate that this is going to work, let's try to retrieve the same little reminders that we saw from the XML HTTP request technique. Just to save a little time, let's copy and paste our 2 MS HTML variables, so the HTML document and the message, and then we can paste those in. I don't want to create a new document this time. What I'm going to do is make it a non-auto instancing variable. And then after Internet Explorer is indeed ready, let's just get rid of this debug.print statement for the time being. We'll comment it out. And when Internet Explorer is ready, I'm going to set HTML doc to be equal to the document of Internet Explorer, so the document property of the Internet Explorer object. From that point, the HTML message I can capture in exactly the same way as I did in the XML HTTP request version. So let's copy the last 2 lines there and then paste those in. And then we'll have the IE.quit technique there as well to make sure that Internet Explorer finally closes down. If we then just display the immediate window, I'm going to press Ctrl and G and then press Ctrl A to select all of the current text, followed by Delete to remove it. Then what I should find if I run this subroutine now is that I get my credential dialog box appearing, and then after 3 seconds it automatically fills in that dialog box, and then it passes back the reminders. I still haven't entered my feedback. Well, I've been making this video, so I can't be blamed for that. So there you go. That's how you can enter the credentials using a fairly tedious technique, simulating actually typing your credentials in to the Windows security dialog box. Now, it's worthwhile mentioning that the security dialog box won't necessarily always appear if you try to connect to this website using Internet Explorer. If you already have an Internet Explorer window open that is already logged into that website, the security dialog box doesn't appear. So just to demonstrate that, let me just comment out the IE.quit statement. So we're left with an open copy of Internet Explorer once this subroutine has finished. If I run the subroutine at this point, you'll see the credentials dialog box appear, it will have values typed in, and then we'll return some values into the immediate window. Just before I demonstrate the next part, I'm just going to change the cell references here. So I'm going to go for A2 to A3. So we're not referring to value. In fact, let's go for C2 to C3. So completely empty cells. Basically, we're passing in empty strings. So just to demonstrate that this doesn't actually matter, if I clear the contents of the immediate window and then run the subroutine again, I'm going to end up with another new instance of Internet Explorer. But even though I didn't see the dialog box pop up, even though I'm not referring to the valid credentials, I still got a set of output. So on this occasion, because there was already a logged in version of Internet Explorer open, the security dialog box didn't appear in the first place, so the credentials weren't required. So I still currently have a couple of instances of Internet Explorer running. What we should do really is check whether we actually successfully activated the security window, or the Windows security window. So the AppActivate method returns a Boolean value, true when it successfully activates the requested window and false when it doesn't. And again, you can read all about that in the documentation. So the AppActivate method explains what return value you get. So what we could do in our code is check if the result of this method is false, then we could simply exit from the enter credentials subroutine. So within our with block, let's have a little if statement. Let's say if not .appActivate, and then we'll need to enclose the name of the window in parentheses this time. So if not AppActivate window security, then exit sub. So essentially that means that if we try to activate that window and it returns false, this will exit the enter credentials subroutine and then just continue with the rest of the procedure. So although this won't make a huge difference, it's important, I think, to be explicit about this sort of thing. We shouldn't be trying to enter values into the security dialog box. You may find if you have some kind of text editor open that send keys actually writes out your username and password into some kind of text editor. So the send keys method will still attempt to write information into whichever active window is available. So having done all that, let's just clear the contents of the immediate window again. And then if we run the login to web page, bearing in mind again, we still have a couple of instances of Internet Explorer available. I'm just going to bring back my IE.quit method and then run that one again. But again, we should see this time that we get the same output, but we haven't inadvertently written out the credentials anywhere. Just to set this back again, to go back to cell B2 to B3, to make sure it references the correct cells again. If I now open up my task manager application, I can press Control-Shift-Escape on the keyboard just to find those rogue extra Internet Explorer instances. There they all are, these extra ones I've been running. So let's just right-click Internet Explorer and choose End Task. And then I'm not entirely sure what this is, Low Mic Utility Tool. Let's end that as well. I don't think I need that. Okay, so with IE quit brought back in, I can run this subroutine with no open instance of Internet Explorer, and it types in the correct credentials for me. If there were a version of Internet Explorer running, then it wouldn't need to enter the credentials, and so it won't. Okay, well, I hope that's all made sense, and I hope even more that you don't have to do this with Internet Explorer very often. If you do have the choice, of course, the XML HTTP request method is far, far simpler. But at least you now know how to make this work for both Internet Explorer and XML HTTP requests. Hopefully you found some of that useful and you'll make use of that in the real world. Thanks for watching. Feel free to drop any comments below. If you've got a better technique that's better than either of the two I've showed you here, please feel free to educate me. So thanks for watching. See you next time.